Good morning, dear students, faculty, staff members, alumni, community members, and distinguished guests. Shalom. Bonjour, merci à toutes et à tous de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui pour cette importante commémoration. I am Professor Angela Campbell. I am the Associate Provost for Equity and Academic Policies at McGill, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. On behalf of McGill University, my colleague, Professor Fabrice Lebeau, the Deputy Provost of Student Life and Learning, and I would like to welcome you to the 2024 commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day at McGill. Together, Professor Lebeau and I have led the planning of this gathering today, and it is our honor and privilege to do so. J'aimerais souhaiter la plus cordiale bienvenue à tous nos distingués invités, et tout particulièrement à Rachel ou Ray Groper, survivante de l'Holocauste, qui nous fait le grand plaisir et l'honneur de se joindre à nous aujourd'hui, ainsi qu'à tous les étudiants présents, dont plusieurs sont des descendants des survivantes. Dear Ray, thank you for being with us here today and to share your and your family's extraordinary story of strength, determination, and resilience, and to honor those whose lives were taken during the Holocaust. J'aimerais également remercier et souhaiter la bienvenue à un membre du corps diplomatique qui est avec nous aujourd'hui, Mr. Paul Hershen, General Consul of Israel in Montreal. Thank you very much for joining us today, for your support, and for your work in the Montreal community. Before we begin the ceremony, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from McGill University, which is on land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. So today, the McGill community gathers to pay tribute to the millions of victims of one of the most terrible chapters in human history. The Holocaust, orchestrated by the Nazi regime, aimed to annihilate the Jewish people and resulted in the brutal murder of over 6 million Jews, constituting 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population. The total death toll reached 11 million, including not only Jews, but also the Roma and Sinti peoples, as well as persons with disabilities, sexual minorities, Slavic people, Jehovah's Witnesses, and political and religious dissidents. The Holocaust is a tragedy beyond imagination. Its magnitude and cruelty have led us to rightly call it a crime against humanity, and it is our responsibility to ensure that the memory of the victims is never forgotten and forever honored. And while the Holocaust ended nearly 8 decades ago, as Professor Lebeau and I stated in our message to the McGill community yesterday, the importance of remembrance at this time cannot be overstated. Hamas's attack of October 7th, 2023, was the deadliest day that Jews have experienced since 1945. In the wake of this massacre and the ensuing devastating war in the Middle East, we have seen a rise in hate-motivated crimes, both worldwide and here in my home in Montreal, where particularly visible and striking events have targeted the Jewish community. In this context, we must be consistent, firm, and unequivocal in denouncing, resisting, and addressing any and all acts of intolerance, intimidation, and oppression. And simultaneously, we are called to foreground care and compassion in our engagements with one another. Today, this commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day provides occasion for each of us, both as individuals and as a community, to reaffirm McGill's absolute condemnation of hate in any form, including anti-Semitism, and our staunch commitment to preventing and addressing it. So before calling on our next speaker, I would like to read a statement from Professor Deep Saini, McGill's President and Vice Chancellor, who regrettably could not be among us today, but has asked us nonetheless to share a few words with you on his behalf. He writes, "On this International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the McGill community commemorates the 6 million Jewish women, men, and children who were systematically persecuted and murdered in the Holocaust. We also honor the millions of others who suffered grave atrocities at the hands of the Nazi regime. In preserving their memory, we are reminded that combating anti-Semitism requires awareness, vigilance, and importantly, persistent work. This responsibility is incumbent on each of us, both as democratic citizens and as members of the McGill community, each with a role to play in strengthening the diversity and inclusion across our campuses and our society. And so this year, as we observe this International Holocaust Remembrance Day, against a backdrop that is especially fraught with geopolitical tensions, we ensure that this dark chapter in history is never forgotten. Today, we carry forward its vital lessons as we seek to build a future in which anti-Semitism, along with all forms of oppression and discrimination, is duly condemned and eradicated. I'd like to now invite Professor Chris Manfredi, McGill's Provost and Executive Vice President Academic of McGill, to offer his remarks.
Thank you very much, Professor Campbell. Madame Gropper, distingués invités, chers étudiants, professeurs, membres du personnel, shalom. Merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui, alors que nous nous réunissons pour commémorer la Journée internationale dédiée à la mémoire des victimes de l'Holocauste et réfléchir aux leçons fondamentales qu'elle nous transmet. In fulfilling its mission of advancing learning, creating and disseminating knowledge, and offering the best possible education, McGill University embraces the principles of academic freedom, integrity, responsibility, equity, and inclusiveness. As we remember the atrocities of the past and reflect on those of the present, it is essential that we hold steadfast to this mission and to these principles. Although McGill's past and present have not always been perfect, we must continue to strive to be a place where diverse people, cultures, and faiths are welcome and can share in our collective mission. Today, I want to emphasize the importance of this commitment in the face of the rising challenge of anti-Semitism on our campuses and in society more broadly. It is vital to the pursuit of our mission that we create a safe and supportive climate for all, where everyone feels respected and can flourish. McGill's initiative against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, launched in 2022, provides us with a roadmap to address these issues. It calls for fostering dialogue, promoting academic freedom, and cultivating an environment of respect and compassion. As we navigate through difficult discussions, notably in relation to the war in the Middle East and the terrorist attack that precipitated it, we must remember that our community is diverse and individuals within it may carry profound anxieties and distress. It is our responsibility to approach these discussions with empathy and understanding, and I want to remind us of the importance of remaining united as a university community, standing firm against anti-Semitism and all forms of discrimination, oppression, and racism. In the spirit of the Holocaust survivors, one of whom honors us with her presence here today, let us remember the power of resilience, compassion, and unity in the face of adversity. Together, we can ensure that our university remains a beacon of enlightenment, a place where diverse voices are heard, respected, and celebrated. And let me be very clear, all members of the McGill community, including the Jewish community, whose close ties and essential contributions to our university are long-standing, will never have to deny or hide who they are in order to thrive within it. As provost of this university, I want to assure you of my absolute commitment to these ideals and assure you that we will continue to pursue them relentlessly. Thank you, merci.
Thank you very much, Provost Manfredi. So it's my pleasure now to invite Rabbi Cheryl Gilbert, who is a valued collaborator with our university, to offer her remarks.
Thank you. Distinguished guests and members of the McGill University community, thank you for inviting me to be part of this important gathering. Shalom. There's a story that's told about one of the great Hasidic masters of the 20th century, Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira. As the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, he was able to spread Jewish teachings despite terrible odds. Also known as the Piasetzner Rebbe, he was a holy beacon of light to his students in the darkest times. In that place of despair and in secret, he would gather groups of young souls hungry for meaning and hope and connection. One day, facing the encroaching darkness of the Shoah, the Rebbe shared with his students a profound teaching from the Mishnah. This is what he said: in a place where there is no humanity, strive to be human. This simple yet profound teaching gave strength to those wrestling with the incomprehensible horrors of their reality. Today, we stand at the crossroads of remembrance and responsibility. The Shoah remains an indelible scar on human history, a stark reminder of what unfolds when the threads of compassion and understanding unravel. I feel that now, at this moment in time, we are being called to respond, to uphold what is needed, to weave these threads back together. The Jewish theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote over and over and over again that, morally speaking, there is no limit to the concern we must feel for the suffering of human beings. From Heschel, we understand that while some are guilty, all are responsible. We must continue to remind ourselves, said Heschel, that in a free society, all are involved in what some are doing. Some are guilty, all are responsible. Both the Piasetzner Rebbe and Rabbi Heschel remind us that we must not separate ourselves from the world, since we are not separate. We are of the world. In a place where there is no humanity, strive to be human, said the Rebbe. Show up, err on the side of presence. Because the lessons of the Shoah teach us the consequences of silence, indifference, and the dangers of letting prejudices go unchecked. The lessons of the Shoah remind us to be vigilant guardians of human dignity and to speak out against injustice in all its forms. Every moment of our lives, we are challenged to moral responsibility. We are called to extend the boundaries of righteousness and justice. Some of us hope that someone else will intercede so as to absolve us of the responsibility. But our shared traditions teach us that we must not look the other way. Some are guilty, all are responsible. This moment requires every one of us to stand up for what is right and to act with moral courage in a world that desperately needs it. In the presence of hatred, let our response be love. In the presence of ignorance, let our answer be education. In the presence of injustice, let our resolve be unwavering. Chazak, chazak, v'nitchazek. Let us be strong, strong, and strengthen each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Gilbert, for your beautiful remarks. It's now my pleasure to invite Ms. Ita Yudin, Vice President, Quebec, of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, to offer her remarks. And I want to take the occasion to thank Ita so much for the collaborations and time that she has given to myself and to my colleague, Professor Fabrice Lebeau, not just in the recent weeks and months, but well before. So Ita, over to you. Just Ita, you're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. And I too value very much our collaboration. I have to say, je vais dire bienvenue à tout le monde. En tant qu'ancienne étudiante de cette université, il est particulièrement émouvant pour moi d'être appelée à participer à la commémoration par McGill de cette date importante de notre histoire. to see the continued efforts and commitment of McGill administration, Angela, you, Fabrice, and many others in working to find ways to create exactly what you were describing, that atmosphere on campus that we all want for our students. You know, this date commemorates, it's a day of remembrance, it's a day of remembering what happened. But I think it's also important to note that while we remember those we lost to the brutality of the Nazi regime, we also remember the liberation. We remember those who fought, those who sacrificed, those who stood against hate, those who risked their own lives and sometimes sacrificed their own lives to ensure that we were able to see the day past what the Nazis tried to accomplish, which was the eradication of the Jewish people. And I think as much as we remember those we lost, and Canada is still home to about 5,800 Holocaust survivors, Montreal was the city that accepted the most refugees after the Holocaust in Canada. And so we have a proud history, not just of remembering, but of working to move forward, to bounce forward to a better place. It's a privilege to have been born here, to grow up here, to have gone to McGill, to have lived the life that I have experienced in Montreal so far, so much so because of those before me and the lessons that we learned. And I think as a community, you know, October 7th, and, you know, you started, Angela, by referencing the horrible massacre, the brutal massacre of Jews on October 7th, which was the worst massacre in one day since the Holocaust, and how it's shaken the community here in Montreal and Canada, around the world. Before October 7th, we were talking about a worrisome rise in anti-Semitism. And since October 7th, the number of incidents that we've seen in Montreal has spiraled out of control. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitism, we've seen a rise in hate, and we've seen an atmosphere where people are feeling free to express things that I don't think they would have a few years ago. And it's wonderful to see academic institutions striving to find ways to work against those who seek to foment hatred, to incite hatred. We will continue to partner to try to find solutions and to do something to bring not just comfort, but security and safety to students on campus who still feel, I think, in some ways most directly, the impacts of what's happening and this rise in anti-Semitism and hate. So while we remember, and you know, I would encourage people to join us in the global campaign of We Remember. If you want to post something on social media, I see it's a mirror image, but if you hashtag We Remember, or in French, Nous nous souvenons, there's a global campaign for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I encourage all of you listening today to post yourselves on social media to demonstrate to the world that as a society, as democracies, we will not stand for this kind of hatred, for this kind of venom, for this kind of toxicity. We will learn the lessons of those before us. We have understood that silence is complicity, and we have learned that every single person has a role to play, and one person can make an immense difference in the fight against hatred. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. And if I could part in one message to the students, they are our future, they are our heroes, and we are all behind you, and we are all with you to support you for what you're experiencing now and for what we are all experiencing as a community.
Thank you so much, Ita. So it's now my great honor to introduce our guest of honor, Miss Rachel, or Ray, Groper. Ms. Groper was born in 1941 in the utterly challenging circumstances of a prisoner of war coal mine in the Ural Mountains during World War II. Her family's journey, marked by resilience and courage, led them from their homeland to several forced labor camps and displaced persons camps, and eventually to a better life here in Canada. They settled in Montreal, where Ray's parents found work and were able to assure their children's education. After attending Sir George Williams College and McGill University, Ray had a very successful career as an educator and a teacher, as Dean of Continuing Education at Vanier College, and as Vice President, Academic Affairs at the Michener Institute in Toronto. Education is at her heart, she's told us. Ray has volunteered on numerous boards, and currently she sits on the board of the Montreal Holocaust Museum. Through the adversities that were etched throughout the pages of her life, Ray Groper emerged as a survivor, defying with resilience and determination the odds that were stacked against her. And today she graciously joins us to share her story, one of courage and bravery, and that of her family. This story reflects enduring qualities of perseverance, resistance, and dignity among so many Holocaust victims, survivors, and their descendants. So it is indeed a true honor to welcome her here today. Dear Ray, thank you so much for being with us and for all the volunteer work you're doing with the Montreal Holocaust Museum to preserve the memory of the victims, the survivors, and their families. We are truly delighted and honored to welcome you here to McGill, your alma mater, and we are looking forward to and honored to receiving your testimonial. So I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. For me to say that I'm almost speechless before I start speaking is saying some. I want to thank you, Professor Campbell, to express thanks to Professor Lebeau, especially to Guillaume Cosset and Neil McDevitt for helping me through this, to Professor Manfredi, but most importantly to students listening, to faculty, and to my fellow alums. I feel at ease at McGill, although the story is not one of ease. I spent a lifetime not talking about the Holocaust. It was never a question of remembering it. It was always a part of my life. But I wanted to be like every other Canadian young person growing up. And it took age and experience to realize that I had to contribute. And my contribution is through my wonderful Holocaust Museum and to reminding people over and over and over again that hatred has no place, that we have to find a way to mitigate it. And as one elderly person, the only way I know how is through education. And that has become my mission. So I'm here today to tell you a bit about myself. It's an abbreviated version, but nevertheless one that will give you a sense of our survival. And I'm one of the people that Etta referred to. I'm one of those 10,000 immigrants who came to Canada when even then the Prime Minister said that none was too many. So the issue of hatred that we see around us, the anti-Semitism, the demonstrations, I want people to think about all students. I want people to think about all society. I don't hate, even though I have reason to, but certain events recently have brought back dreams that I thought were long, long submerged. So let me tell you a little bit of what provoked them. Next. My parents were born in Warsaw. Their whole families, of which only 5 or 6 people survived, their whole families were Polish from time immemorial. I was born in a prisoner of war coal mine in a place called Yegorshino, which I can't find on the map today, but it's near the big city of Novosibirsk, which means New Siberia, in the Ural Mountains, and in a country that was then known as USSR. Today it's Russia. My parents were middle-class business people. They wanted to go to university, but were restricted from doing so, both by funds and by restrictions to universities for Jews. My mother was a trained designer milliner in partnership with her brother, who was a furrier, and her father and my father were in the shoe business. They were a close-knit unit that stayed connected to the rest of their family which came from two small villages outside of Warsaw. One was called Przysacha and another Demblin. My mother and father met through friends in Warsaw and were married in 1938. En 1939, lors du bombardement de Varsovie par l'aviation allemande, mes parents décidèrent avec mes deux oncles de fuir vers l'Est. Les Russes, toutefois, capturaient les réfugiés qui traversaient leurs frontières et les envoient dans des camps de travaux forcés. Mes deux parents devaient travailler dans les profondeurs de la terre pour extraire le charbon. Les conditions de vie dans le camp étaient horribles, terribles, il me manque des mots, sans abri ni nourriture adéquate, et par des températures inférieures à zéro, beaucoup plus froid que notre ville de Montréal. En 1943, l'exploitation de la mine fut interrompue et ma famille fut déportée vers Samarkand en Ouzbékistan pour y effectuer des travaux forcés dans les minoteries. Durant le voyage, une centaine d'enfants embarqueraient avec nous dans des wagons plats. Seule une dizaine survécuront, dont moi. On ne peut pas expliquer cet miracle. Ma famille devait s'abriter, devait vivre dans une cabane dont le sol était en terre et non en pierre. Cet abri faisait office de logis. Quand mes parents travaillaient dans les minoteries, il arrive à voler un peu de farine pour faire du pain. Issu d'une famille très religieuse, mon père avait une grande connaissance de la Torah et des textes sacrés. Il permit ainsi à notre famille de bénéficier de l'aide des chefs de tribus musulmanes de la région. Heureux de pouvoir trouver en mon père un interlocuteur capable de dialoguer sur les ressemblances et les différences entre la Torah et le Coran. Et dans cet endroit, Joseph, mon frère, est d'ailleurs né à Samarkand. Can we go on to the next slide, please? There's an example of the bustling streets of Warsaw where my parents lived. I actually went back to look at the apartment they were in, and regrettably, it was a strip mall. Next. This was the difference in my life. This was the moment before I was born, and it was the bombing of Warsaw and the German invasion of Poland. Next. When we were shipped to the forced work camps, this was an illustration example of the kind of accommodations that we were offered. And this was luxury compared to what others had to live through. Next. When my parents chose to go east rather than west, they hoped that they would have an opportunity to cross into the USSR and find some way to survive. When they got to the border, they went from Warsaw to Białystok and then to Tashkent. When they got there, they were captured and they were forced onto these trains and moved to forced work camps to meet the Stalin quotas that had been set for the economy. Next. There's an illustration. There was no ventilation, no health care, no support of any kind. You worked or you died. Next, please. Here's an example of the trains that were used to ship prisoners from one section of the country to another. And in 43, my parents were forced onto these types of train cars and were shipped from minus 40 degrees to plus 40 degrees from the Ural Mountains to Samarkand in Uzbekistan. Now, most of you will know where Uzbekistan is. Sometimes when I speak to groups, they think I've made up the name, but it's really a place. The trip from Novosibirsk, Yegorshino, to Samarkand, Uzbekistan, as I mentioned earlier, had 100 children on board in open flat cars going from minus 40 to plus 40. And of those 100, 10 survived. And as I said tout en français, I don't know how to explain it except to tell you that I was one of those 10. I think the answer belongs to my mother, who was the strong force in our family. In 1946, the family made their way back to Poland, to the city of Wrocław. They stayed there for a short while, but could only stay a short while as their anti-Semitism was absolutely rampant. I have a childhood memory of my father and my uncles barricading the door, and I have no idea to this day, after having asked them numerous times how they could have protected us. They felt they had to do something. And at that point, we went as best we could out of Poland through illegal means, through paying off drivers, through forests, through walking, through trains, and ended up in displaced person camps in near the city of Warsaw. Next, please. When I was doing this PowerPoint originally, my children wanted me, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll speak quickly. My children wanted me to give you some idea of the distance our family had traveled. So A was Warsaw, B was Novosibirsk, C was Samarkand and Uzbekistan, and D ended back in Austria. On the web, when you calculate, we calculated that it was 12,239.92 kilometers. Imagine, without planes, without trains, without any of the communication, we ended up in Salzburg. My mother, who was the source and the strength of our family in the DP camps, discovered that the international ladies' garment workers were recruiting skilled labor. And so she applied, and she was permitted to bring her family to Canada. And we arrived in Montreal in July 24th, 1949. I went to the museum on Pier 21 in Halifax and found that the students at St. Mary's, as students are like to do, the students at St. Mary's had documented all the immigrants, and I found our name and the ship and have an illustration of that for my kids and my grandkids to see. We settled in Montreal, and as you heard earlier, we found work, my mother as a designer, my father as a factory worker, but they loved being here. They loved this country. They assured us of a modest livelihood, a connection to the Jewish community, and a very high emphasis on education. So as you've already heard, I attended university and spent the rest of my life in education, in administration, around education, and have every hope and prayer that my words will reach people to diminish hate, to make our students feel comfortable, regardless of which side they believe in and what they understand. The misuse of words when there's lack of education is what makes some of the terror that I feel and that you see reflected across the world. In 1961, I married a lovely man named Aaron Groper, and we were together for 61 years. We raised two gorgeous daughters, a wonderful family, 2 fantastic sons-in-law, I'm doing inventory, and 5 gorgeous grandchildren. I am proof that even incomprehensible evil can be overcome. Thank you for listening. I have much more to say, but I'm so pleased to be here to say a little. Please, please, let us all work together to try and make this community a better place. I love what Rabbi Gilbert said. She was reflecting what I feel. Thank you.
Ray, thank you so much. That was incredible and powerful. And I know that I personally won't ever forget it. And I'm sure everyone who's listening hears your message. And I really hope that we can all take it to heart and internalize it and manifest it in our day-to-day engagements with one another. Thank you so much. So it's now my pleasure to introduce 2 students who are gracing us here today with their engagement. And I'll first ask Shira Lister, who is president of Hillel McGill, to read the Survivor's Promise.
We, the survivors, entrust the legacy of the Shoah to you, the second generation and thereafter to all generations. We want you to vow that the sacred memory of our suffering shall never be scorned or erased. We want you to recall the heroism of the many kinds of Jewish resistance. Remember the shining examples of sacrifice and kindness from the righteous Gentiles. Remember the racial prejudice and discrimination which led to the Holocaust. By not forgetting, you will pay tribute to those who were murdered. By not forgetting, you will ensure for those who live and those who are yet to be born that we intend never to allow such cruelty and horror to happen again. This is the heritage we, the survivors, entrust to your custody for safekeeping for generations to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shira. It's now my turn to invite Mr. Jonathan Zirin, who is the co-president of the McGill Jewish Law Students Association, to offer his remarks.
Thank you, Professor Campbell. Merci, chers invités et tout le monde qui se joint à nous en ligne. On Saturday, January 27th, the world will unite in observance of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. This was a day that was chosen to mark the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1945. Beyond commemorating the victims of Auschwitz and its survivors, along with other European camps, this day provides an opportunity to reflect on the global impact of the Holocaust. Today, I will attempt to shed some light on a group that is often overlooked in this reflection, the Jews of North Africa. The Jews of North Africa, thought to be around 300,000 to 400,000 people at the time, experienced the Holocaust quite differently than their brothers and sisters in Europe. In all, it is estimated that only a few thousand North African Jews died during the Holocaust, with an even smaller number of victims from Vichy-controlled Algeria and Morocco, and the vast majority coming from Tunisia and Libya under German and Italian occupation. Mais ce n'est qu'une partie de l'histoire. Pour les Juifs de l'Afrique du Nord, l'Holocauste a été une période de crainte, une crainte constante d'être les prochains, de subir le même sort que les Juifs d'Europe. Ce fut une période de grande incertitude, marquée par l'imposition de lois antisémites et la présence de troupes nazies dans leurs villes, dans leurs quartiers, dans leurs écoles, dans leurs communautés. For approximately 2 years, much of North African Jewry was either directly or indirectly under the control of the Nazis and their allies. In Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, many Jews endured forced labor, dispossession, deportation, and persecution. They were denied basic rights, stripped of their citizenship, and segregated from the rest of the population. Families were torn apart, lives were lost, and the vibrant tapestry of North African Jewish life was forever altered. In Morocco, where my family comes from, it is only because of the determination of King Mohammed V to resist the pressure to collaborate with the Vichy regime and its anti-Jewish laws that the local community, by far the largest in the region, was mostly spared. As legend would have it, when asked by the Nazis and Vichy authorities to help round up local Jews, King Mohammed would have said, "Il n'y a pas de Juifs au Maroc, il n'y a que des sujets marocains," there are no Jews in Morocco, only Moroccan subjects, so as to indicate that he was not making a distinction between his Jewish and non-Jewish subjects. Il est de notre responsabilité en tant qu'individus de veiller à ce que les expériences des Juifs de l'Afrique du Nord soient reconnues et préservées. Ce faisant, nous garantissons que leur mémoire ne sera jamais perdue et que leur souffrance ne sera jamais oubliée. McGill University, as an institution committed to education and enlightenment, plays a crucial role in keeping these stories alive. Through education, research, and dialogue, we can continue the global effort to prevent these horrors from ever reoccurring. Thank you et merci.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Very, very important words. And I want to thank you and Shira in particular. I know it's not easy to come into these kinds of events as students, but you've both done a remarkable job and offered us important and beautiful contributions. So thank you both so much. So at this time, and I know there are people joining us today from Montreal, but also from different cities around the world, I would ask everyone to take a minute of silence to remember the victims of the Holocaust, but also to reflect on some of the words and calls to action that we've heard together this morning. Please join me in a minute of silence. Thank you. So I'd like to now invite a great friend and supporter and mentor and ally of the Jewish students here at McGill, Rabbi Shmuley Weiss from Chabad McGill, to offer his remarks and prayers.
Thank you. Good morning. Provost Manfredi, Professor Campbell, Mrs. Groper, honorable guests, and the worldwide McGill community. As the slogan goes, never again. The year was 1945 in the ghetto, the Salish ghetto, right before the holiday of Shavuot, sometime in June after the holiday of Passover. There was a young man, Yisachar Dov, together with his father, his mother, his sisters, some of his brothers, nieces and nephews, cousins, grandparents, were taken out of the Salish ghetto and sent to Auschwitz. As they arrive at the gates of Auschwitz and the selection begins, young Yisachar Dov, 19 years old, the prime of his life, was separated from the rest of his family. Known as Beryl, his family went one direction, he went in another direction. Not knowing what exactly is going on, an elderly Jewish prisoner walks up to him and tells him in Yiddish. I'll say the words in Yiddish, and I'll translate into English. Junger Mann, gedenkt der Tag, weil der Tag is a yahrzeit von dein Eltern. An elderly Jewish man who he later found out was a Polish Jew who was in Auschwitz from the very beginning, miraculously surviving all those years, walks up to him and tells him, young man, remember the date of today. And he told him the date, the Jewish date. remember today because today is your parents' yahrzeit. Today is a day that you'll commemorate the yahrzeit of your parents. I'll tell you the story because that young man was my grandfather. Miraculously, he survived, and that's a whole story for itself. Ends up in a DP camp, first in a hospital for many months, in a DP camp, meeting my grandmother, moving to the United States and starting their life. First ending up in New York, but he was too sick to live in New York. He had permanent lung damage from being all those months, 10 months, in Auschwitz. And the doctors told him, move west, Southern California. The weather over there is dry, better for your lungs. So together with his wife, his two brothers, two of his 5 brothers who survived, and one cousin, they went out west to Los Angeles, California, and began their lives. When I say 2 brothers and 1 cousin, he had many brothers, many sisters, many cousins, many aunts and uncles, grandparents, nieces and nephews. Him, his 2 brothers, and his cousin were all alone in the world, together with a bunch of other survivors, and started their life. This story is not unique to my grandfather. Many people growing up in my neighborhood had similar, if not the same, very similar stories. I grew up with these realities my entire life. As a child, never truly understood it. As you get older and you start talking, it resonates a little bit more. But till today, there's something that fascinates me the most about my grandparents. Grandmother has her own story, also a Holocaust survivor, and all his friends. But so oftenly I would see strolling to synagogue on Shabbos morning with a friendly smile, good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. How did they do it? How did they remain so positive? Start their lives. They all had nobody. They had nobody. They had no in-laws to help them raise their kids. They had no parents. My father grew up in a generation in his class that nobody had grandparents. To me, that idea is pretty out there, especially in the Jewish community, to say there's no grandparents. It was normal. Nobody might. Why? They all died in the Holocaust. I say this story because I look for inspiration to my grandfather's generation. I didn't know my grandfather when he was younger, but definitely when he was older, he had no hate. He didn't live with hate. He didn't live with fear. He lived with positivity, and he lived for the future, for the present and for the future. He made choices that he would rather live than revel in the past and hate. Because hate doesn't help anybody. It just swerves around in our hearts and poisons everything. Never again, as we say, is happening as we speak now. The horrors of October 7th, the massacre or the pogrom, they call it a pogrom, massacre of innocent Jews. The only crime that they had were being Jews and living in the land of Israel, living in Israel. And a lot of funny things happened in the weeks coming. The day afterwards, down the block from McGill University, there was a celebration. Slogans like, from the river to the sea, are being screamed on campuses everywhere. The United States, on the street, posters everywhere. When you think about that idea, what does that mean? A lot of people don't even understand what it means, but it's a popular slogan. Why not say it, right? When you ask people what it means, a lot of people, like I said, don't know what it means. But what it means is that 7.2 million Jews should be kicked out of Israel and go back, in the words of many, where they came from. You mean Europe, where the Holocaust happened? You mean all the Middle Eastern countries where they expelled, many Middle Eastern countries where they expelled many of their Jews? Where are they supposed to go? So essentially 7.2 million people is either leaving or a genocide. And it's a popular slogan, right? When we say never again, it means now. It means we stand up to this injustice. We're not afraid to call it out. As unpopular as it may seem, we have to root this out. And like Ms. Groper said, through education, through educating people on history, not fabricating history, not writing our own history, and not rewriting the rules that you believe all victims unless they're Jewish living in Israel, or putting up a sign calling for rewriting the rules of what genocide means, and putting up a sign saying McGill University should divest from $20 million from genocide, and saying taking it down is putting up, it's a peaceful protest, but taking it down is violence. Yet putting up posters of hostages is violence, and taking them down is a peaceful protest. We can't continue to rewrite the rules every time, and anytime it has, anytime it's a Jewish person or an Israeli or Israel versus another person. That's what never again means. Anti-Semitism means taking Jewish people, holding them to a standard that nobody else is held to, pointing them out and saying, this is bad, and this is, and nobody else, and everybody else is good, for absolutely no reason. Never again is down, never again is standing up to the truth, never again is standing up to hate. And I don't mean not to have dialogue. Dialogue is important. A nuanced dialogue about the issues that are going on today are very, very important. But when you are looking for a partner in dialogue and you find nobody, what is one supposed to do? I finish off as some inspiration from my grandfather, that hate doesn't help. Love is the only way. Be a candle. A little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. Each individual has the responsibility of being a candle. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Shmuley. So I now invite Professor Ula Madej-Krupitsky, who is a faculty member, professor in the Department of Jewish Studies here at McGill, and she will pronounce our closing remarks for this ceremony. Ula.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to speak here today. A 17-year-old David Graeber was among nearly 400,000 Jews who were incarcerated in the Warsaw Ghetto, the largest ghetto in occupied Europe. He was a vital member of a secret archive called Oyneg Shabbos, which in Yiddish means joy of Sabbath. It was an archive that 60 of the ghetto inhabitants created to preserve a memory. As David himself put it, their mission was to write down everything that were unable to cry and shriek out to the world. While David and his fellow members of the Oyneg Shabbos had a few illusions about their survival, they drew comfort and meaning from the conviction that their actions will alarm the world to what happened and the horrors they've experienced will never take place again. When in August of 1942, David was helping to stash underground metal milk cans filled with nearly 35,000 pages of collected documents, letters, and testimonies of the Nazi atrocities, his final statement read, and I quote, "I would love to see the moment in which the great treasure will be dug up and scream the truth to the world, so the world may know all, So the ones who did not live through it may be glad, and we may feel like veterans with medals on our chests. We would be the fathers, the teachers, and educators of the future, unquote. Well, majority of the archive was found and recovered in the late 1940s and early 1950s, and up to date, significant portions of these findings were published and actually in several languages. Still, it would be safe to say that David's hopes about becoming educators of the future remain largely unfulfilled. And even in the last few decades, with continuous or arguably even growing interest in the Holocaust, the stories of the majority of those murdered by the Germans and their collaborators are still largely unknown. And seeing so many of you gathered here virtually to remember and commemorate gives me hope that perhaps we are finally keener to listen closely to what David and others wanted us to know. Over a century ago, Shimon Dubnov, a Russian Jewish historian, asserted that the task of a historian is to resurrect the dead, to make them to be seen, heard, and above all understood. And as a historian myself, I tend to think that this is the most meaningful way to engage with the memory of the Holocaust. That is to delve deeper into the experiences of David and millions of others, to see them for who they were, individuals who lived full lives and not nameless mass of impending victims. And building upon the awareness and empathy that brought you here today, I would like to encourage everyone to take Dubnov's call seriously, to use the many resources available at McGill and beyond to attain a nuanced understanding of not only the history of the Holocaust, but also of those whose lives were taken. And David's last written words encapsulate the sentiment particularly well. May history attest for us, he urged. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nadezh Krupitsky, for these most appropriate and inspiring and uplifting closing remarks. Thank you so much. So to all, this concludes our commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We've heard so many crucial and important words, and I truly hope that as we move forward during these difficult times, we can take them deeply to heart and not only think about them, but also use them as a source of inspiration for all of our actions and engagements with one another. Alors, merci encore de votre présence et bonne journée à tous et à toutes.